So Gene, what are you doing?
Making some grout.
Ooh, fancy.
So first thing you do is that you get into a very windy room where all the dust blows into your face.
Makes sense, makes sense.
So what I'm doing is I'm not putting a lot in because a little bit goes a long way. This much did 25% of the room already. So just like when we were making the mortar, we're doing the same thing with the grout. Now that we've got our powder in there, we season to taste. So you want it to be like chocolate pudding. A little bit runny because it'll dry. And you don't worry too much about its overall texture because the sponge does most of the work. You just have to get it into the crack. Everything else is pretty easy.
Making chocolate pudding.
Mm-hmm.
The white powdery mess you see on the tile we'll clean up later.
It's called tile haze. So when you got the grout in the crack and you use the sponge to smooth it down, you end up getting some excess squeeze out, and that'll come off with a good mopping and cleaning. It's best to wait till the tile's completely dry, or the grout's completely dry before you do it. Okay. We got some pretty good chocolate pudding. Alright, so this is the part that's the most fun. You'll need 2 tools for this. If you're really good, you can do 1 tool. So I use this one. You get a bit of mud on there. And I take it, a little bit on the other one. Take it, and start scraping in. You want to make sure you fill the grout into the crack completely. But don't worry too much about it because the sponge is going to even everything out to make it look pretty good. So, got this far, finish up this little bit here. Alright, so take a look at it real close the way it is. And this is what you do. Start with circles.
And that's a wet sponge.
This is a wet sponge. Nice circles, right? So what you're doing is evening it out. Then you take the long end, do a drag, drag.
Wow, this video is kind of a drag, huh?
Yep, of course, naturally. And there you go.
Oh.
And then do that continuously.
And then how long does this stuff take to dry completely?
12 hours to dry, 24 hours to cure. After 24 hours, you can come back and mop it. If you go too soon, if you see here, this is getting dry. But if I come back with a sponge and start rubbing on it, or use a mop, I'm going to start getting it wet again. It's going to go ahead and absorb it and become malleable again. It's like adding water to powder or flour. So, but if you have some areas that were pretty bad, you can come back like I'm doing and just run over real fast
To do
just to clean up.
anytime you want to fix your mistakes.
Yeah, but you want to do it within 3 hours of laying it. Anything after that, you're only getting the top layer wet, and then it may not dry and actually bind together. It's kind of like when you have 2 sides of peanut butter, right, on the bread. When they go together, they stick really well. When you pull them apart, not too bad. Put them back together, the stickiness eventually goes away. But if one's wet, one's dry, you kind of put it together, it's not going to adhere very good, and you're going to have a good bond. So then over time, your grout will crack, chip, absorb more stains, and so on. So you want to make sure it dries, but you do have some working time.
Okay.
So always have your bucket of water, and you have to cycle this out. So every hour or so, just dump the water, start with fresh. This is about 3 gallons right here. And I have that gallon there to keep my mud wet. So as I'm throwing it down, it doesn't get too dry. Because the longer I leave it here, drier it gets.
Okay. And that's how you grout tile. Now you know.